She wore no belt, no team colors, just a plain gray tank top. The champion smirked, mocking her service. He thought she was a statue guarding a tomb. He never imagined that statue was about to teach him about gravity. The air in the Long Beach arena crackled with a high-strung, electric energy. It was the annual Golden State Martial Arts Invitational, and the atmosphere was a potent cocktail of nervous anticipation, adolescent bravado, and the sharp, clean scent of disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed high above, casting a sterile glare on the polished hardwood floors and the vibrant blue and red of the competition mats. Shouts from coaches, the rhythmic thud of feet, and the low murmur of 1,000 conversations blended into a single, roaring pulse. Competitors, clad in immaculate white GIs adorned with the fierce logos of their dojos, paced and stretched, their movements sharp and purposeful. Into this cauldron of controlled chaos, Anya Sharma entered unnoticed. She moved with a quiet deliberation that seemed to absorb the noise around her. At 30, her presence was a stark contrast to the youthful exuberance filling the hall. She wore a simple, heather gray tank top that fit neatly over a toned frame, and immaculate white martial arts pants, the drawstring tied securely. There was no belt around her waist, no splash of color, no emblem to declare her allegiance or rank. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back into a simple, severe ponytail. She approached the registration table, her steps even and measured, her posture ramrod straight, a living embodiment of stillness in motion. The volunteer, a teenager preoccupied with his phone, barely glanced up as she handed over her form. Name, Anya Sharma. Division, Women's Advanced Open. He scanned her ID, pointed vaguely toward a crowded warm-up area, and immediately returned to his screen. Anya didn't head toward the throng of fighters shadowboxing and performing high kicks. Instead, she found an empty bench against the far wall, away from the main flow of traffic. She sat, not with the relaxed slump of someone waiting, but with the upright, alert posture of a sentinel at their post. Her hands rested folded in her lap, her gaze fixed forward, watchful and unervingly calm. A few rows up in the spectator stands, a woman in her late 50s paused, a paper cup of coffee halfway to her lips. Colonel Evelyn Reed, USMC, retired, squinted, her eyes narrowing with a familiar sense of recognition. She leaned forward, studying the lone figure on the bench. "I know that posture," she murmured to her husband beside her. A year ago, on a solemn trip to Washington, D.C., Evelyn had stood before the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington. She remembered the profound silence, punctuated only by the crisp, metronomic click of the guards' heels on the plaza. A storm had been brewing, and a cold, persistent drizzle began to fall, but the soldier on duty never flinched. For 21 perfectly executed steps, the guard moved with a precision so absolute it felt sacred. That guard had been a woman. That guard had been Anya Sharma. Evelyn wasn't entirely certain until she caught a clear glimpse of Anya's eyes across the arena, focused, still, and imbued with a deep, abiding watchfulness. They weren't the eyes of a fighter waiting for a match. They were the eyes of a guardian. Down on the floor, the tournament churned on. Names were called, points were scored, and the cycle of victory and defeat played out again and again. Through it all, Anya remained on her bench, a fixed point in a swirling world. She didn't stretch. She didn't bounce on her toes. She didn't engage in the nervous rituals of her fellow competitors. To most, she was an anomaly, a late entry, perhaps, or someone who had wandered into the wrong event. A pair of teenage boys nudged each other, snickering at the woman with no belt. "Must be her first time," one whispered. Anya gave no sign she heard them. She sat with the practiced stillness of someone who had stood watch for hours in freezing rain, not for applause, but because it was her duty. When Anya's name was finally called, her movement was so sudden yet so quiet that it startled those nearby. Next match, Mat 3, Women's Advanced Open, Anya Sharma versus Ricky the Rocket Jones. Anya stood, walked to the edge of the mat, and bowed. The gesture was brief, precise, and devoid of flourish. All eyes were now on her. The gray tank top, the bare waist, the utter lack of any identifying marks, it all screamed amateur. Across the mat, Ricky Jones, a local favorite known for his explosive speed, bounced on his toes. He was a bundle of kinetic energy, his GI adorned with patches from a half-dozen past victories. He saw Anya, took in her plain attire, and a confident, almost pitying smirk spread across his face. This would be easy. The referee gave his signal. Hajime! Ricky exploded forward, true to his nickname. He launched a flurry of probing jabs and a snapping front kick, designed to overwhelm and test his opponent's defenses. But Anya didn't retreat. She didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her hands to block. Instead, with a minuscule shift of her weight and a slight turn of her shoulders, she allowed the kick to slice through the air a millimeter from her ribs. Ricky's jabs meant nothing but empty space. He circled, a little faster now, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He tried again, a more complex combination. Jab, cross, hook, low, kick. It was a textbook sequence, fast and clean. Anya took a single, deliberate step backward, then angled her body slightly to the left. The punches slid past her head. The kick swept under her elevated foot. Every single strike missed. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic dodge. It was as if she had calculated the exact trajectory of each attack and moved the absolute minimum required to remain untouched. The low hum of the crowd began to fade. People who had been chatting or checking their phones were now watching, their expressions shifting from mild curiosity to focused attention. The fight wasn't proceeding as expected. Ricky, accustomed to his opponents either blocking frantically or retreating in disarray, was visibly frustrated. He let out a sharp ki shout and lunged, pouring all his energy into a powerful side kick. It was a critical miscalculation. He overcommitted, his momentum carrying him forward with unstoppable force. At the last possible second, Anya didn't block or counter. She simply pivoted on the ball of her left foot and took a small, lateral step. It was a movement of breathtaking economy. Ricky's kick flew harmlessly past her, and his own forward momentum, now unchecked, did the rest. He stumbled, his feet tangled, and he sprawled unceremoniously off the edge of the mat. A stunned silence fell over the arena. The referee, looking as surprised as anyone, hesitated for a beat before raising his hand and calling the match. Winner, Sharma. Anya bowed to the empty space where her opponent had been, then to the referee, and walked back to her bench. She hadn't thrown a single strike. She hadn't needed to. Whispers erupted immediately. Pure luck, one coach muttered. She was just stalling. He got tired of it, said another. But a few, the seasoned judges, a handful of veteran instructors, and Colonel Evelyn Reed in the stands, knew better. Evelyn leaned toward her husband. That wasn't luck, she said, her voice low and firm. That was discipline. The kind they teach you when moving 1 inch without orders can get someone killed. The brackets for the next round were posted an hour later, and a palpable shift in mood swept through the arena. A new name appeared next to Anya Sharma's, Damien, the Viper Cross. The name alone carried weight. Damien Cross was more than a competitor. He was a brand. A 3-time reigning champion, he was known for his ruthless efficiency and a charismatic, almost cruel, arrogance. His GI was a tapestry of sponsor logos. Energy drinks, athletic wear, a high-end car dealership. At 28, he was in his prime, a predator who moved with a sleek, reptilian grace. When he walked, people made way. When he fought, crowds roared. As the match was announced, Damien strode toward mat 3, a retinue of training partners trailing in his wake. He saw Anya sitting on her bench, still and silent. He paused, his eyes raking over her from head to toe, taking in the plain tank top and the absence of a belt. A slow, contemptuous smirk formed on his lips. He broke from his group and walked directly toward her, stopping just a few feet away, forcing her to look up. Well, he began, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I've heard of you. The Tomb Guard. He made a show of looking around dramatically. This isn't Arlington, sweetheart. There are no stones to protect here. Anya's expression remained unchanged, but a stillness fell over the immediate area. The air grew thick with tension. Damien leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, mocking whisper. Standing still like a statue, guarding a cold rock, that doesn't teach you how to face a living weapon. It doesn't prepare you for me. The insult was a physical thing, hanging in the air. It was a direct assault, not just on her, but on the silent, sacred duty she represented. In the stands, Colonel Reed's hands clenched into tight fists. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, others chuckled uncomfortably. This was personal. This was a desecration. Anya simply rose to her feet. She met his smug gaze with her calm, steady one, and then she bowed. It was a simple, respectful gesture, the same she had given her previous opponent. But in this context, her refusal to be baited, her unshakable composure, was an act of defiance more powerful than any retort. It infuriated Damien. His smirk tightened into a snarl. He turned his back on her and jogged to the center of the mat, shaking his arms out, a clear display of dominance. The referee called them to the center. As they stood facing each other, a teenager in the front row whispered to his friend, "Oh, she's done for. The Viper's gonna shred her." The entire arena held its breath. The stage was set not just for a fight, but for a public execution. The question wasn't whether Anya would lose, but how badly. And yet, as the referee raised his hand to signal the start, a profound, almost reverent silence descended. It was the silence of anticipation, the feeling that something fundamental was about to be challenged. The referee's hand chopped down. Hajime. Damien Cross moved like his namesake. He didn't explode. He flowed, coiling and uncoiling with a terrifying fluidity. He led with a feint, a flicker of movement designed to draw a reaction, then launched into a blistering series of attacks. A spinning hook kick aimed at her head, a sharp back fist to the temple, a low, sweeping kick designed to cut her legs out from under her. The air hissed and popped with the speed of his limbs. It was a dazzling, deadly display of offensive mastery. But Anya wasn't there. For every strike, she was a ghost. The head kick sliced through the space where her head had been a microsecond before. The back fist grazed nothing but air. As the leg sweep came around, she didn't jump or retreat. She simply lifted her foot a few inches, letting the attack pass harmlessly beneath it. She was the unmoving center of a hurricane he created. Her movements were so minimal, so economical, that from a distance it looked as if she were hardly moving at all. She was a rock in a raging river, and the water was beginning to part around her. The crowd, which had been primed to erupt for Damien, was eerily silent. The initial awe at his speed was being replaced by a creeping, collective sense of disbelief. This wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration of something otherworldly. The judges leaned forward, whispering to one another. They had seen thousands of matches, but they had never seen this. Absolute defense without a single block. Damien's confidence, his very swagger, began to fray at the edges. His attacks, once fluid, became slightly more rigid. A sheen of sweat appeared on his brow. He was a predator whose prey refused to act like prey. She didn't show fear. She didn't tire. She didn't even seem to be trying. He was fighting a phantom, and it was beginning to unravel him. He growled in frustration and pressed harder, throwing a wild, looping punch. Anya swayed back, her torso bending at an impossible angle, and the punch whistled past her face. As his arm was fully extended and his body momentarily open, she moved. For the first time in the entire tournament, she initiated an offensive action. She raised her right hand. She didn't form a fist. Her fingers were relaxed. As Damien's momentum carried him past her, she extended her index and middle fingers and lightly, almost gently, tapped him on his exposed ribs, right in the soft tissue beneath his armpit. There was no force behind it. It wasn't a strike. It was a notification. The touch was electric. Damien jerked back as if he'd been tasered, a gasp escaping his lips. It wasn't pain. It was the shock of absolute violation. In that single, feather-light touch, she had communicated a terrifying truth. I was here. I could have ended this. Every second you have been attacking me, you have been utterly, completely vulnerable. I'm choosing not to harm you. His psychological armor shattered. The smirk, the arrogance, the persona of the Viper, it all dissolved, replaced by a raw, primal fear. He stared at her, his chest heaving, and for the first time, he saw her not as a statue or a woman, but as something he could not comprehend. And he realized, with a chilling certainty, that he was no longer the one in control of this match. He never had been. Humiliation burned in Damien's eyes, hot and acidic. The silent tap had done more damage than any physical blow ever could. It had stripped him of his dominance, exposed him as a fraud in front of thousands. His discipline, honed over years of relentless training, evaporated in a wave of pure rage. He let out a guttural roar, a sound of a cornered animal, and abandoned all pretense of technique. He dropped his stance, lowered his center of gravity, and charged. It was a raw, powerful takedown attempt, a move borrowed from his high school wrestling days. He aimed to drive his shoulder into her midsection, wrap his arms around her legs, and slam her onto the unforgiving mat where his superior size and strength would surely crush her. It was his last resort, a desperate gamble to reclaim control through sheer brute force. It was the exact wrong move. As the 200-pound champion surged toward her like a freight train, Anya did not brace for impact. She did not try to sidestep. Instead, she did the last thing anyone expected. She took a small, deliberate step forward, directly into the path of the charge. The moment of contact was surreal. Just as Damien's shoulder was about to connect, Anya's body changed. She didn't resist his force. She accepted it. She sank her weight, rotated her hips, and turned her entire body like a perfectly oiled hinge. It wasn't a throw from judo or a sweep from karate. It was something more elemental, a principle of physics made manifest. She became a conduit, a revolving door for his own rampaging energy. His forward momentum, finding no resistance, had nowhere to go but where she directed it, sideways. The visual was staggering. Damien's massive frame, propelled by his own furious charge, was spun off balance. His feet tangled beneath him as his upper body was flung into a new, unintended trajectory. He was no longer in control of his own limbs. A look of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his face as he realized he was falling, fast and hard. He hit the mat face first with a heavy, sickening thud that echoed through the cavernous, silent arena. The sound broke the spell. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. No one cheered. No one moved. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier and more profound than before. Damien lay still for a moment, the wind knocked out of him, his mind trying to process what had just happened. He wasn't injured, but his spirit was broken. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up to his knees. He looked across the mat at Anya, who stood in the exact same spot, her posture unchanged, her breathing even. She hadn't broken a sweat. She hadn't celebrated. She simply stood, watching. "Ow!" Damien whispered, the single word raspy and filled with a dawning, horrified respect. Anya didn't answer. She walked toward him and extended her hand. He stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then at her calm, clear eyes. He saw no pity, no triumph, only a quiet dignity. He took her hand, and she effortlessly helped him to his feet. Standing before her, stripped of his titles and his pride, Damien Cross did something he hadn't done in a decade. He bowed. It wasn't the perfunctory bow of a competitor. It was a deep, humble bow of a student to a master. And then the applause began. It wasn't the wild cheering of a sports victory. It was a slow, rolling wave of sustained, respectful clapping that acknowledged they had witnessed something far more significant. Anya won the championship, but as she walked off the mat, she left the glory behind her, a silent, solitary figure returning to her bench. Long after the final trophies had been awarded and the arena had begun to empty, Anya Sharma remained on her bench at the edge of the now empty mats. The tournament coordinator, a hairy man named Frank, finally approached her, holding the large, gleaming gold trophy for the women's Open champion. "Ms. Sharma," he said, his voice softer now, tinged with awe. "You didn't stay for the ceremony. You won." Damien Cross withdrew from the tournament right after your match. Said he needed to reevaluate his training. He hesitantly offered her the trophy. "This is yours." Anya looked at the polished gold, then back at him. Her gaze was steady. "I don't need a trophy." Frank blinked, confused. He placed the heavy award on the bench beside her. "Well, at least let us get a photo for the website. It's tradition." "I didn't come here for tradition." Anya's voice was low, but carried a profound weight. A long pause hung between them. Finally, Frank asked the question that had been lingering in the air all day, the one no one else had dared to ask. "Then why did you come? Why did you fight?" Anya's gaze drifted across the silent, cavernous space. Her fingers curled slightly in her lap, an almost imperceptible movement, as if gripping something that wasn't there. The cold steel of a rifle, perhaps, or the crisp folds of a flag. "I served with a boy," she began, her voice a near whisper. "His name was Leo. He was barely 20, smart, funny, fierce when he had to be, but always respectful. He wanted to be a martial artist when he got out. Talked endlessly about opening his own dojo back home in Utah, teaching kids about honor and discipline." She paused, her eyes fixed on a distant point. "He used to teach me kata in the desert, under the stars, between deployments." Said it kept him sane. A shadow passed over her face. "He didn't come home." Frank's professional demeanor dissolved. I'm so sorry," he stammered. Anya gave a single, sharp nod, acknowledging his words without dwelling on them. "I promised him. I promised that if I ever got back, I'd fight in one tournament for him. Just one. Not to win, not for a trophy, just to show up. To honor what he believed in." She finally looked at Frank, her eyes clear and resolute. "That strength doesn't always have to be loud. That stillness isn't weakness. And that sometimes being underestimated is its own kind of power." The coordinator stood there for a long moment, the shiny trophy seeming cheap and meaningless beside the weight of her words. He simply nodded and walked away, leaving her in peace. From the nearly empty bleachers, Colonel Evelyn Reed watched the exchange, having stayed long after her husband had left. She had seen battles, lost friends, and witnessed more than her share of courage. But what she saw today, the quiet fulfillment of a sacred promise, would stay with her forever. It wasn't a story of a fight, but of a vigil. That night, Evelyn wrote down what she had seen. She didn't send it to major news outlets. She posted it on a few private forums for veterans and Gold Star families. The story didn't go viral. There were no trending hashtags. It was a quiet story, shared between those who understood its language. A few weeks later, in a small, unassuming dojo in a quiet town in Utah, a memorial seminar was held for Corporal Leo Martinez. There was no advertising, just students, teachers, and a single, crisply folded American flag resting on a table beside the mat. During the ceremony, a package arrived. Inside was a custom-made black belt, embroidered with gold thread. On one end was the name Anya. On the other, Leo. No one knew who sent it. But the old sensei who ran the dojo said that a woman had delivered it herself. She had stood at the back of the room for a long time, hands clasped behind her back, watching the students train. She never spoke. And when she finally turned to leave, she left behind no name, no medal, only a profound, respectful silence. And for those who knew, that was more than enough. True strength is in protecting what we cherish. To all the silent guardians, we see you. Comment respect below to honor their legacy. Share this story to keep the light of that honor shining. And don't forget to subscribe for more moments that deserve to be remembered.